Bursting with energy now, Jovanka.
Yeah.
Ready to fight?
Yes, the adrenaline is pumping and the two are ready to play. And we have our first move. Alireza opens with his king's pawn. Now, will we see a Caro-Kann from Artemiev? No, he copies. And the knights now come out, and now the bishop has developed to a row Lopez. And this is a little bit of a favourite of yours, David, I think.
Yeah, I've played this many times. The world champion, Magnus Carlsen's played this many times. Nowadays, Shakhriyar Mamedyarov is one of the biggest adherents of this last pawn push. It's not the most common move, so it's already forced Alireza Firouzja to think a bit. 20 seconds in a blitz game in the opening, only on move 4. That's quite a deep think. That's quite a big one. Maybe Firouzja just struggling to adapt to the time format this far. And definitely a strategy from Artemiev to surprise his young opponent as early as possible. So this one, the aim is to develop Black's bishop behind that pawn, but it does give White a free hand in the centre, and that's why Alireza Firouzja pushes. And we will see a pawn trade, White's bishop jumping out. And I actually had this recently where Black pushed a pawn to kick away White's bishop, but no, Artemiev just trades pieces. And a lot of trades there we saw. So White has won the pawn back that he sacrificed earlier on, but it's still level material. Black, meanwhile, has a slightly worse pawn structure. If you look at Black's pawns on the left side, he has double pawns on that c-file. And that means that White, with the better pawns, long-term, has an advantage. Black is going to fight that with active pieces. His bishop now developing to attack a White knight. This is still well-known territory. This is still standard stuff. But who will be better versed in the intricacies of this position?
Yeah.
So far, it looks like Artemiev with 30 seconds extra on the clock.
And Artemiev was following the model of Magnus Carlsen, who actually played this with the black pieces and won. And, wow, things are really heating up because Black has castled his king over to the left.
Yeah, so big decision for White. Once Black removes that bishop from attack, once he retreats the Black bishop, White has to decide which way, left or right. Where is the White king going to find safety? And it's definitely a stylistic thing as well. If White goes and castles his king to the right side, then we'll see kings on opposite flanks, and both sides are going to launch brutal attacks against the opponent's king. If White wants to play safe, Firouzja will see White's king try and castle on the same side as Black, making it more difficult for both sides to attack without compromising their own king position. OK, Artemiev, he retreats his bishop. Slightly surprised to see him even think about that one.
Okay.
Firouzja chooses the safer, more solid option.
Yep. And, OK, so here, what kind of moves can Black play? I think one of the moves that is available is for Black to reinforce his pawn structure on the left side by picking up his b-pawn and moving it one square, just getting a nice pattern. Yeah,
just defending all your pawns. That's very sensible. Black's another option would be to bring that rook in the corner into the centre. That rook currently for Black is not doing anything. So you can activate that. You can keep the Black king nice and safe, tuck that away one square. OK, he does activate his rook, the most natural move, I feel. White might just play copycat, do the same. White's rook in that bottom corner, not doing anything. There we go. This is why both players are so good at blitz. They're so kind of in tune with these natural moves. Your idea now on the board, Jovanka, creating that nice pretty pattern with the black pawns on that left flank. And yeah, that's blitz tip number 1 from me. Just put your pieces on natural squares. Only burn time on the clock, calculating later when it's strictly necessary, when those forced trades are happening, when there's loads of captures, loads of checks, some kind of attack.
Yep, absolutely. That's a really good strategy. And also another blitz tip from me would be actually know your openings inside out. You don't want to be using up time on the clock. And Firouzja moves forward with his pawns, taking space, and a nice safety-first approach from Artemiev, just tucking the king away out of any potential danger.
Yeah, so despite the fact the evaluation bar is slightly on White's side, it's roughly balanced chances right now. And the reason I slightly prefer Black is because Black has more pawns around his king. In blitz, you don't want to get attacked. So Black, yes, he has double pawns on that left side, but they keep the Black king nice and safe. And look at this, the Black bishop retreats as well to keep the Black king nice and safe. And the bishop will protect the light squares, the pawns will protect the dark squares.
Yeah. What will he attack with then? Everything's defending them.
Well, this is kind of Artemiev's calling card. You know, he likes to play in a very defensive mode, just waiting for someone to either overextend or just to commit to a plan, and in which case he will now use up time and energy resolving those issues. But for the time being, just keep it flexible.
Flexible and solid. That is what Artemiev loves to do in blitz and bullet.
And
And you mentioned overextending. White has pushed all his pawns forward now in the centre and on the right. And there is a risk for Firouzja that those pawns will become weaknesses, actually, later on in the endgame. They might be very strong, those pawns. They might be very weak. That's what the debate will be about over the next few turns.
And one of the problems that I can see for White, I mean, his position looks great, but take a look at the knights. They aren't really working and there's no good circuit for them. And, well, Firouzja really pushing hard with his pawns on the right side. I mean, this does look very attractive, but at the same time, it's very committal because suddenly squares are available to the Black Knight.
And you know what I want to do, Ivanka? I don't want to sideline the Black Knight.
No.
I don't want to put it on the edge of the board. You can actually kind of pretend you're sacrificing the Black Knight right now and plant it in the centre and trade knights. That means the D5 square, because actually, if you look at the E line, that's where all the tension lies. That's where there's a pin against the white queen. Actually, the queens and rooks on the same line. You can pretend, OK, he could have centralised his knight. I think he would have had a great position there, Black. But now there's an issue. That Black Knight temporarily is offside. So maybe White is going to try and profit from that by playing in the centre somehow. The Black Knight, it does take 2 moves. It will step back at some point and relocate. Meanwhile, White, Alireza, Firouzja, he's brought his knight out. Is that a pawn sacrifice?
Yeah, I mean, can you not just capture the pawn?
So Black's bishop, actually, look at this Black bishop on its long diagonal. It can go and take a white pawn. It's risky, though. You don't want to necessarily allow White's knight to jump into the centre.
It's a little bit poisoned, isn't it? Because if a knight jumps into the centre, it comes with effect. For instance, attacks the bishop and also threatens knight jumping into the C6 square. And that would be critical. What
I would do, probably just to keep safe, is to plant the Black bishop in front of the Black king. Just control all those light squares. There we go. The Black bishop doing a great defensive job and putting some pressure on White centre from afar.
And that is Artemiev's style in a nutshell.
Yeah.
You know, let the fight come to him. Rather, he's not going to be looking for a fight immediately.
Yeah, Should I not be overexcited about that bar thing happening here?
Not yet.
Not yet.
If it shoots over +1 or +2 for either side, then maybe. But right now, it's very tense.
And I know that, you know, it takes a few seconds for it to sort of calculate deeply enough.
Yeah, that's... So
I try to, but with Blitz, you know...
My eyes on it as well, Kai, don't worry. And I know the viewers at home, it's very easy to get distracted by that bar, so let's leave a couple of seconds before we trust it, especially later when the moves are coming instantly. Yeah. Bang, bang, bang.
I know it's smarter to trust you guys. I can sort of hear it on you guys. OK, now it's critical.
Yeah. Not always trust us, but sometimes.
Yeah. I mean, the big thing that Artemiev is actually thinking about is whether he can just make a move like rook takes rook.
OK. So...
to make some trades and then perhaps try to put pressure on the pawn that White has that's in the middle of the board on the light square.
Makes sense there, definitely. And, OK, a long think for a blitz game by Artemiev. I was about to praise him just a moment ago for his clock handling. He was 30 seconds up, but now he's 30 seconds down. And, OK, he just pushes a pawn. That, again, typical Artemiev, typical blitz move. That last pawn push creates a hiding place for the Black king if he needs it. It doesn't commit either. Also, maybe hinting to Firouzja that Black wants to push his pawns on that left side later on in the game. And Firouzja, he takes that hint to heart and he says, OK, I don't want you ever pushing those Black pawns forward. That's where Black has the majority on that left side. So White pawns are pushing.
But 2 squares, then.
Yeah, 2 squares. That potentially, that pawn is weak. So committal decision there from Firouzja, and Artemiev steps forward with the queen.
It's creeping. I mean, that queen looks like nice and centralised, but it also has some potential evil intentions on the left side of the board.
Yeah,
so
on both sides of the board.
Yeah, both sides of the board, actually. Very, very flexible square for the queen. In fact, it's actually been nicknamed the Goldilocks square because the queen can move in both directions.
Not too hot, not too cold.
Not too cold. Perfect. Yeah. Just right. And, OK.
So the question for Firouzja is what to do next. White has established this kind of pawn mass, but you can't push any more pawns forward without weakening squares.
Wait 1 second. He's just jumped in with his knight, but isn't there consequences? OK, so Artemiev immediately picks up his rook. But I was looking at playing rook takes rook and then maybe some knight takes pawn at the right time.
I think it was just about holding together for White there. Tactically, Firouzja spent quite a lot of time trying to work out whether he could plant his knight in the middle of the board, and he was met with an immediate response. So Artemiev, they're just keeping solid again, and not wasting time on calculating.
And, well, Firouzja advancing his pawn tickling the left side of the board, you know, inviting black to make a weakness.
Yeah, probing for those concessions, just hoping that black pushes pawns.
Okay, and now we see it. Now we see it. Knight takes pawn. Okay, now with some calculation, because the big thing is after queen takes knight, black will just step forward and play queen takes knight.
Yep, so black has sacrificed a knight, but that's purely to destabilise the white knight in the centre. And, OK, this is going to happen, as you mentioned, Ivanka, that white knight disappearing as well. So temporarily, black is actually a pawn up. So white needs to justify this somehow. Is that with a queen trade? Is that with white's queen going up and grabbing a pawn now on this same line? Either way, black is doing great here, I feel. Black is at least fine.
I don't know. Queen takes pawn is the move I would play.
OK, but if... Yeah, OK, black's queen in the centre of the board. It looks like he's going to do a great job, though, in the middle game. It's going to be very easy for black to just control the position.
And all the while, we have to mention the clock. OK, queen takes queen played. Firouzja just under a minute, which means that the nerves start jangling a little bit and players start relying a little bit more on instinct.
Yeah, and here we're just going to get a glimpse into who's more in form and who's quicker, who's sharper, who's more alert.
OK.
And, OK, right now, black's still a pawn up, but after a rook trade, so white's rook can go and take the black rook, white will most likely get the pawn back. And, OK, endgame skills, though, that is the key. Remember those endgame stats. Artemiev ahead, doing great in endgames throughout the tour.
And it's happened as you predicted. So when it comes to these endgames, what is... White's plan seems to be really quite straightforward, which is to relocate the rook to the F line and start targeting some of black's weak pawns on the right.
Yeah, that's hard to stop as well.
Yeah.
White's rook can go in either direction to just slide to the right one square, slide to the left one square, and white's rook is definitely eyeing up and targeting some of the weak black pawns. Black would love his king in the centre right now, but it's too far away. The black king is not participating.
And black has the big problem. Does he dedicate some energy in trying to win white's weak pawn? OK, we see the rook mobilise onto that line right now. OK.
Yeah, Firouzja, if he gets his rook onto that 7th rank, if he's able to capture a pawn with that rook, it's trouble. It's real warning signs for Artemiev. So he needs to somehow contain the activity, contain the power of white's rook.
What?
He doesn't. He lets that rook roam free. He goes after white's furthest advanced pawn with his king.
And now take another pawn.
OK, so black, I guess, is going to regain white's pawn in the centre of the board with his bishop on the next turn.
Okay.
Maybe...
So you want to do it in a little bit more controlled way?
OK.
Retreat the rook.
I was going to say, maybe Artemiev's just calculated it all out. Maybe we were just being too general here, and he was being really, really concrete, working out it's fine. But both players now about to go under 10 seconds.
And
it's going to be easier with a knight, I feel, in this endgame suddenly.
Yes, definitely.
The knight is going to cause all sorts of threats, all sorts of thoughts.
Yeah, and take a look at white's king. It's going to be very, very active. Now it's going to start mobilising towards the centre, supporting some of its own pawns.
Black gave up a pawn temporarily, but he's going after that pawn again with his rook.
OK.
OK, Artemiev happy to go for this trade. White now, again, is a pawn up.
And just look how fast the players are making those moves. OK, 10 seconds left on the clock.
OK, the bar might say it's roughly level, but black has to be super careful. He's a pawn down, and white's pawn is a pass pawn in the centre there. It's marching forward. There it goes.
OK.
You need to keep an eye on it from behind with the rook.
Exactly, and the white king is preparing to step forward and hunt down that pawn. Chances for any size to do anything, I think it's... Ooh,
difficult
nice
now.
Move.
Nice move. That was a discovered check, so white's rook suddenly had opened up its line towards the black king, forcing the black king backwards. And now white's knight is going off to the side, but this feels like it's close to a draw now. Black can eliminate that knight if he wants. I don't think he even needs to. He doesn't. He pushes a pawn forward. But a huge threat. White is threatening to push forward and make a new queen with the discovered check again.
Yeah, and this
Black
is
has
why.
to block that pawn.
And he's done that. I find that Firouzja is being very inventive, actually, finding ways to keep that pawn alive.
Again, black cannot go and take white's pawn because white's knight would deliver a really nasty check. You have to keep that white knight under guard.
And
but
finally...
White's 2 pawns up. This is still difficult to save for Artemiev.
Keep making moves with 1 second left on the clock here.
OK, rook takes pawn, and now the knight is going to head over to search for the bishop.
But
Okay.
look how tricky Firouzja is.
I
Every
know.
move is a trick. Once that last pawn move has been pushed, black cannot take it because black's rook is tied down defending its bishop. OK, can Firouzja find another trick?
No.
Went down to another 1 second there. OK,
No,
he's
this is it, David.
still a pawn up, but that pawn has disappeared. And if the rooks come off, it's a dead draw. King of pawn endgame. Neither side can break
Okay.
through.
And this is a very instructive strategy from Artemiev. He just will keep the rook on the 5th row.
And it's going to, that's Philidor's position. It's a well-known draw, and it's going down to king versus king. First game is a draw.
And you can just see it on Alireza Firouzja. He's not too happy about that with the white pieces.